Senator Graham is here with us today, but before we get started, Senator, let's just hear the president calling you out the other day, because I love this. It's always South Carolina on the front line of every fight.
If Senator McCain and Senator Graham and others want to go after somebody, they should go after me.
And you're saying you will, right, Senator Graham?
If he has any doubt who I hold responsible for Benghazi and a failed foreign policy, it is Barack Obama. He's the man that was commander-in-chief. He's the guy that kept the consulate open. He's the one who allowed it to become a death trap. It was his responsibility to be able to help those poor people who were under attack for 8 hours and nobody came to their aid. And he is also responsible for what the American people are told about the death of 4 brave Americans. He, above all others. Yes, Mr. President, I will hold you responsible. It's not personal. I'm just doing my job. And by the way, when you were Senator Obama, you had no problem holding the Bush administration responsible.
He would have been the first person, had this been George W. Bush, to be calling for a joint committee, a special select committee, as you have.
He would have been the first. Anybody got in his way would have been run over. He voted against Gonzales. He voted against Alito and Roberts. He had a very, let's put it this way, he had no problems challenging the executive branch. And now we're talking about a system failure, Josh. Not just one thing, but everything broke down. Number one, the British left Benghazi. When their ambassador got attacked in June, they left. When our consulate got attacked in April and June, not only did we not leave, we denied reinforcement requests made dozens of times. And on August the 15th, and this is the one that breaks my heart, there's a cable coming back to the State Department from Ambassador Stevens saying, Benghazi is now falling into the hands of al-Qaeda militia. There are 10 groups we've identified. I want you to know if we're attacked in a coordinated fashion, we cannot defend this consulate. And right after that, they denied the extension of the 16-person military unit. They denied the request for additional American personnel. Why? Because the State Department said we wanted to normalize relationships with the Libyans. They want to be so much unlike Bush that they do stupid things. There was no Libyan government to normalize relationships with, and consequentially, the consulate became a death trap. And yes, Mr. President, I put that at your feet.
Well, they overcorrected. And in addition to that email from Ambassador Stevens, there were 2 requests in March and in June from the head of diplomatic security in Libya saying we really need to fortify Benghazi. Both fell on deaf ears. The State Department ignored it, and summarily so did the President.
I think it goes back into that question is why. Well, he has a world view that I think is misplaced. Bush oversold how secure Iraq was. I went to Iraq with Senator McCain in 2004 and 5, and they said, well, this is just violence by a few dead-enders. If you spend any time talking to the troops, our strategy, we didn't have enough troops to secure Iraq. We were overselling the nature of our security and underestimating the threats from al-Qaeda and Sunni militia groups. Well, what happened in Benghazi is the same thing. Once the president said bin Laden's dead, al-Qaeda's been dismantled, he became a captive to that narrative, much like President Bush. And the truth of the matter is al-Qaeda's been on the rise for a year or more, and Libya's Exhibit A. The Mideast is about to blow up. Josh, last week, here's what happened. There was a shooting conflict between the Kurds and the Arabs in Iraq. It's about to blow up there. It breaks my heart. We were inside the 10-yard line. We fumbled the ball. Having no troops in Iraq has put people back into their sectarian corners, and Iran's the biggest beneficiary of our leaving Iraq. They have more influence than ever. The Egyptians now are undermining Israel instead of helping. Afghanistan, the Tajik warlords are now talking about rearming because all we talk about is leaving Afghanistan. The King of Jordan's under siege. And last week the UN said that the Iranians are less compliant than ever when it comes to their nuclear program. Last week, in addition to Benghazi, Libya, the Mideast is about to break apart. Now you got the Israel-Hamas conflict.
We almost have to think, when you remember that famous moment aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln where George W. Bush had the banner,
mission
accomplished.
Right.
And he had to eat those words over and over and over. And so the president and the vice president run all over the country during the campaign saying that GM's alive, bin Laden is dead, and now they're captive to their own narrative, just like Bush was with mission accomplished.
Let's talk about that, because isn't it ironic that in their effort to not repeat the mistakes of Bush, they've repeated the Bush-type mistakes on steroids? Why would you pick Susan Rice to explain Benghazi if she knew nothing about it. Can you imagine a conversation at the White House? Somebody says, well, we got to inform the American people. We need to get ahead of this story. And they look around the table. Susan, why don't you go talk about Benghazi? She says, I don't know anything about it. I got nothing to do with it. Don't worry. We'll tell you what to say. Now, isn't that an absurd concept? That why wasn't Hillary Clinton telling us about Benghazi?
Well, what's fascinating is, and I think it's one of those moments, and you may know who said this, but there was a political commentator that said the definition of a gaffe is when the truth is accidentally spilled. Yeah. And effectively, the president did that last week. Because when he said that Susan Rice was sent to those Sunday morning shows at the behest of the White House, obviously they're the ones that gave her the intelligence.
But he went a little further because he was mad at John and myself, and he says, why pick on her? She didn't know anything about Benghazi. Mr. President, why pick her?
Yeah.
You picked the most politically compliant person. She's a longtime friend. She would literally say anything you told her, and he knew that. The reason they didn't pick someone who knew about Benghazi is they probably wouldn't go out there and talk about Benghazi the way she did. So the talking points now have become very important. Because General Petraeus said within 48 hours or 24 hours, I informed everyone Al-Qaeda was involved. My memo had a reference to Al-Qaeda militia. By the time it got to Susan Rice, they had changed the reference to Al-Qaeda, deleted it. Now, who's the biggest beneficiary of that deletion?
White House, the president.
The president's reelection. Now, I don't know if this was done for political reasons, but I'm a good old country lawyer. And if the same people are involved in vetting this memo and Al-Qaeda is taken out, and they know that helps the president politically to keep the narrative going, bin Laden's dead, GM's alive, Al-Qaeda's dismantled. These same people are under criminal investigation for leaking classified information about the bin Laden raid, about the underwear bomber plot in Yemen, and about the cyber attack on Iran. There's literally a criminal investigation going on of top White House officials, and the crime they're accused of committing is leaking classified information about successful operations to make the president look good. Is it much of a stretch to say that those same tight people would withhold information to protect them?
Well, that would be in the same vein of thought. And for those of you just tuning in, we're speaking with our senior senator from here in South Carolina, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham. I've always said that South Carolina doesn't lead from behind as the Obama administration does. We lead from the front. Senator Graham's doing that with regard to Benghazi and our national security. I want to ask you, in light of, you referred to Petraeus in the comments made Friday. He testified, of course, to the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, right. and in that testimony said what you just referred to, that his memo always called this a terrorist attack. The State Department came out several days after this, said we've always thought it was a terrorist attack. And yet, somehow or another, the mainstream media is fundamentally uninterested in this. I mean, this is worse than Watergate on the scale of cover-up.
Well, here's what I would tell you. Nobody died in Watergate. And this is a massive national security breakdown, long time in the making. There was an Al-Qaeda storm building in Benghazi. The Red Cross saw it. The British saw it. We ignored it, and we had 4 Americans die. Well, now, I was on Meet the Press Sunday. Now they're asking questions. The election is over. And I would say that this last election cycle was pretty heartbreaking. Can you imagine if the Bush administration had done what the Obama administration had done? One of their spokesmen went out to inform the public about an event, and it was completely different than the actual facts. It would have been front page news every day.
Well, absolutely. And I want to come back from this break and talk about this election, because we have to change the narrative. I've told everybody on this program, as conservatives, we don't need to abandon our beliefs, but we need to rebrand them. We don't have to moderate our principles, but we have to modernize them. And I want to talk about immigration, and I want to talk about Romney's comments about those 47%. So stick with us, Senator Graham. We'll be back right after this break right here on Common Sense. Welcome back into the program. Glad you're with us. We're here with U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, our senior senator from South Carolina, who is leading from the front as it pertains to Benghazi and national security. And I said before we went to the break, Senator, we talk about immigration, the aftermath of the election, but one last question on this national security issue. As it pertains to Benghazi, as I said in the last segment, in my view, and I think in the view of a whole host of folks, this is worse than Watergate. People died here. 4 Americans were murdered by a terrorist attack. And you've been calling for a select committee in the Congress that would investigate this. Not surprisingly, Senator Reid, the majority leader, came out and voiced opposition. Do you think there's a good prospect we could get a select committee?
I think public pressure may lead us to that, because when you have 5 committees doing independent investigations, interviewing people separately, that's a lousy way to get to the truth. You had a select committee for Watergate and Iran-Contra. I think it served the country well. You're going to have Hillary Clinton go before the Foreign Relations Committee, Petraeus before the Intel Committee, Panetta before the Department of, the Armed Services Committee, maybe Holder before the Judiciary Committee, and you're really not going to get a coherent story. So I think a select committee where you have the same people asking questions of everybody is the best way to get to the truth. And about Harry Reid, remember when the Scooter Libby, Valerie Plame situation about the outing the CIA agent? Well, that's nothing compared to this, because she and her husband were talking about it independent of the White House.
That was purely political.
Well,
this is national security.
Yeah, well, I mean, you call it what you like. Every Democrat, including President Obama, Senator Obama, said the Bush White House cannot possibly independently and fairly investigate itself. So when me and McCain asked for an independent investigation of the White House, who leaked details about the bin Laden raid that got the Pakistani doctor put in jail for life, when they leaked details about the underwear bomber plot in Yemen, it compromised a double agent and his family. When they leaked the details about cyber attacks on Iran combined with Israel, it tipped the Iranians off as to what we were doing. We asked for an independent counsel, and they all said no. It's just breathtaking they get away with that. How in the world can the people who pushed the Bush administration, you're not capable of investigating yourself, sit on the sidelines while the top levels of the Obama administration are being investigated for breaches of national security to make them look good? But at the end of the day, there are no photos of President Bush President Obama sitting around the table trying to help the people in Benghazi. During the bin Laden raid, there are 2 movies being made about it. You know every detail. There are books coming out. You got all these photos, and the president deserves credit. That was a tough, gutsy call. But it's almost as if he were not president during the Benghazi affair. What did he do for 7 hours? He said he ordered people to help those folks. Well, did they disobey his order? Who told them to stand down? What options were given to the president? I've heard he didn't get notified of the attack until an hour and 18 minutes into the attack. Where are the photos of him sitting around trying to figure out Benghazi?
Well, he was getting ready to go to Vegas. He had a fundraiser.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Josh, the reason I want to get to the bottom of this is, 1, I want to know why the system failed so badly. 2, I want to hold people accountable. And 3, I want to make sure the next president learns from this. And 4, I want the families to get some peace.
Well, Congressman Trey Gowdy told me that the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee was going to spend as much time as necessary to investigate this. I know you and Senator McCain and Senator Ayotte are working to get a select committee.
I know we got to talk about immigration, but Trey Gowdy has just been a gem for the conservative cause. He pushes people without being mean about it. He has tough questions in a way that the average person can understand. Boy, I tell you, he's hit the ground running.
I've told him that he possesses what I call prosecutorial prowess. When you watch him in there, it's amazing. It's like he's in the courtroom all over again.
Yeah, and it's like he's trying to do right, not do political stuff, trying to get the right answer. And just the way he does it has just been a credit to South Carolina.
Between him in the House and you in the Senate, we're going to do a lot in South Carolina.
Jim DeMensto / Tim Scott and Jeff Duncan and Joe Wilson and Mitt Mulvaney. We got the best on the House side. You got young energy. Joe Wilson's young, according to Strom Thurmond. We got some.
Anybody's young compared to Strom Thurmond.
We got some of the most energetic people in the country.
We've got one of the most powerful delegations there is.
We hit above our weight.
That's true. We always have, though. That's a South Carolina kind of thing.
Now let's talk about the future of the Republican Party and the conservative cause.
Yeah, I'm quite worried about. A lot of folks in our party, Senator Graham, have said that we just need to put our noses to the grindstone, don't rebrand or remessage in any way, shape, or form. Mitt Romney was a bad candidate. Look, I don't think he was probably the greatest candidate, but it's bigger than him being not absolutely a great candidate. We need to do a lot more at reaching out to the Latino community, the black community, younger Americans. And I think I was with Attorney General Alberto Gonzales over the weekend, got to see him. And, of course, he was Bush's Attorney General and supported the president when he pushed for comprehensive immigration reform back in 2006.
I was there.
I know you were. And I support this comprehensive reform. Yeah. Attorney General Gonzales.
From 2004, we went from 44% to 31% in 2008. What happened? In 6 and 7, we engaged in comprehensive immigration reform under Bush's leadership.
That's right.
Our party had legitimate concerns about some aspects of what we were trying to do. The bill wasn't perfect, and it's okay to disagree about how to solve the problem. It's not okay to create an impression among the Hispanic community that you're the problem, your last name's the problem. The reason we're not being overrun by Canadians, they come to Myrtle Beach in the spring and they go swimming and they spend money and we're glad to have them. They come in March and they leave. The reason we're being overrun by people from the South is because they live in corrupt, poor countries and they come here to get jobs. Now, I blame us for having broken borders and not controlling who gets a job in America. And you can't get immigration reform right until you secure your border and control who gets a job. But in the process of trying to do that, you got to watch what you say and how you say it, because a lot of Hispanics believe that we hate them. I don't. I hate illegal immigration as a national American problem, and I want to fix it. I don't hate Hispanics. But if you're listening to some of the debates out there and some of the way it's being presented, it was more about your last name than it was broken immigration.
Well, Tom Tancredo, God help him, back in the debate in 2006 came out, and the rhetoric was pejorative. It was hateful. It wasn't thoughtful. And unfortunately, it did put a perception in the minds of many Hispanics in this country, legal or illegal alike, that Republicans are against you. And you said some very important things there. That Hispanic community tends to be very patriotic. Lots of folks in the military.
Pro-life.
Very pro-life. And that brings me to this issue of social issues.
We don't have a social issue problem.
There are people that are saying that, though.
Well,
I agree with you.
Let me tell you. Guess who supports traditional marriage the highest? What demographic in America has the strongest support for traditional marriage?
I would say the Latino community.
You'd be wrong. It's the African American community.
Seriously?
78% of African Americans in this country support traditional marriage. A high percentage of African Americans are pro-life. Have you ever been to an African American church on a Sunday?
Oh, yeah.
You better eat a big breakfast.
Yeah, you can be there for a while.
You're going to be there for a while, and you're going to have a lot of fun.
That's right.
They talk about Jesus. They talk about taking care of one another. They're very pro-life. And I'm convinced that conservatism will help more African American families and Hispanic families achieve the American dream than big government. I believe that. And the problem is, when they hear Republican, they don't listen much after that, even though they agree with a lot of our issues. If you put on paper issues that we're for, and you don't put the party label behind it, you'll be knocked out of your chair at how close we are. So it is about reconnecting conservatism. If we continue to lose 71%, as we did in this election, of the fastest growing demographic in America, which is Hispanic community, and lose 93% of African Americans forever, and 67% of people under 30, 2 or 3 elections in a row, we become a dinosaur party for no good reason.
It's the permanent minority party, and I agree with you on social issues, because I believe that social issues are the bridge to building a stronger Republican Party. School choice is not the least of them. School choice works for everybody.
It is the civil rights issue of our time. Who's the biggest loser of poor public education? It's minority families.
Absolutely.
What Jeb Bush did in Florida, that's how we get reconnected to the African American community, is come out with a very aggressive better schools agenda. With Hispanics, we tear down the rhetoric wall we've built and we solve immigration. Not catering their votes, doing what's good for America. If you believe, as I do, people come here to get jobs and they live in very poor countries, you'd probably come here too if you could. But we can't have everybody in America who's got a bad deal somewhere else overrun our borders. Secure that border and deal with the magnet that brings them here, which is illegal hiring. All of us have a Social Security card. You've got one. We have to show that card to get a job. My solution, part of the solution, is to turn the card into a biometric document. I don't mind having my photo on my Social Security card with some identifying information. So when I go apply for a job, my employer doesn't have to guess or wonder if I'm here legally. He can verify it in about 30 seconds.
That's right.
If all of us did that, then it would be hard as heck to hire an illegal immigrant. And if you did under those circumstances, you should go to jail or lose your business. Secure the border first. Have biometric documents to control illegal hiring. Give employers who cannot find workers here in America at a competitive wage a chance to hire somebody temporarily outside the country. If you go to a meat packing plant in Saluda, most of the people there are Hispanic. We have pretty high unemployment, but there are some jobs it's just hard to fill in America. A temporary worker program, which the unions hate, will allow employers to access labor legally, and everybody who comes doesn't have to be a citizen. But what do you do about the 12 million?
Yeah.
That's where this breaks down.
Well, I think the 12 million people who are here illegally now, that's the question. But we need to, as you said, secure the borders first, make sure we put in place a identification system, a temporary worker program. And frankly, all these are part of the Bush plan back in 2006. And what concerns me, Senator Graham, and I'm not trying to just turn it into a political calculation. We need to pass comprehensive immigration
for the good of the country,
because it's the right thing to do, right?
Terrorists can come. Everybody coming over doesn't want to, get a job. Some people coming over that border want to kill us.
Right. I mean, for national security reasons, for the good of the country, we need a comprehensive strategy. But politically, there are people that are saying, well, President Obama is going to get credit for this, and so I would wish we would have gotten it through under Bush. But this is the time we're going to have to, as conservatives, stand up and take a leadership role on this and say, we are for immigration. We want legal immigration, we want safe immigration, but we're for immigration. Can we change that narrative, or do you think this is going to be a feather in the president's hat?
I think no matter what we do, we're going to be seen as being brought to the dance to some extent. But here's the good news. There's a few of us who were there before.
Right.
And here's the really good news. The job approval rating of President Obama among Hispanics was under 50. The highest unemployment rate in this country is young Hispanics, right?
Yeah.
And President Obama promised in 2008 as candidate Obama, in my first year, I will pass comprehensive immigration reform. He went to Obamacare instead. He didn't lift a finger. He broke a promise. He played them to get their vote. And they voted for him because he was the lesser of two evils.
Well, they perceived that Mitt Romney's self-deportation comment
You got it.
Yeah.
They're not attached to Barack Obama and the Democratic Party yet. So here's what we do. We put an American solution to American problem. We secure that border. We control who gets a job in America. We have a temporary worker program that will keep us economically strong. Then we turn to the 12 million and say, come out of the shadows. If you've broken the law apart from immigration, you're not welcome. You will leave. Some will leave and some will be allowed to stay, but on our terms, not theirs. And here's the deal. Biometrically get identified so we know who you are. Start paying taxes, and you cannot stay here unless you pass English proficiency exams as a condition of staying. We'll give you plenty of time to learn English, but you'll have a renewable legal visa, and part of the requirement is to pay taxes, have a job, and pass English proficiency exams. And you will never get to be a citizen ahead of anybody who's been waiting for years to get here. You have to get back of the line. We're talking about a 12 to 13-year path before you can even get a green card. To me, that is a fair solution. But here's the goal for Lindsey Graham. I want to end it. I don't want 12 million 20 years from now. I don't want to do what Ronald Reagan did. Give legal status to 3 million and hope you never have it again. I want to secure that border, control who gets a job, and put incentives on the table for legal immigration and take the magnets for illegal immigration off the table. And that gets us to a controversial issue. We're one of two countries on the planet.
Just birthright citizenship.
You got it.
Yeah. 14th Amendment.
Now listen, I'm willing to be firm and fair to the 12 million. They're not going to self-deport. And you got to think of it this way. A grandmother who's been here for maybe 20 or 30 years has got kids who are U.S. citizens or maybe grandchildren U.S. citizens. Do you think the family is going to watch grandmother self-deport? What would you do to protect your grandmother? That was never a good solution. Be fair, be firm, be logical with the 12 million, but break this endless cycle of illegal immigration.
Break the chain so we're not kicking the can down the road to
Merit-based economic immigration. In the future, you will not get a green card unless you have points earned where you can help our economy. You come here if you can add value to America. No more chain migration. And if you get a green card, you're not going to bring your third cousin. It's just immediate family only. But here's a loophole in the law. If you come here illegally and you have a child, that child is automatically a U.S. citizen. You need to look at the number of births in border state hospitals that are to illegal immigrants who hire an ambulance for the express purpose of coming to an American hospital so their child will become a U.S. citizen. I don't blame people for taking advantage of that as much as I blame us for allowing it to happen. We need to change birthright citizenship in the future. I don't want to strip people who've benefited from this, but I want to stop the magnets or take off the table the magnets that will induce future illegal immigration. And if you're opposed to, in the future, changing the law so an illegal immigrant is not rewarded for breaking our law, that makes me wonder if you want to solve the illegal immigration problem to begin with. Is it right to give American citizenship out under those terms when people fight in the military to get American citizenship, when people wait for years to get American citizenship? If you come across the border with a 1-month-old child or, you know, a 2-year-old child, does it make sense that 2-year-old is disenfranchised and the one who was born on our shores
is immediately granted citizenship?
That makes no sense.
Well, let me ask you this, because you're talking about, of course, the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment instituted, was it 1868?
It was 1866. The 14th Amendment basically said the southern states, if you leave it up them to determine citizenship, they will disenfranchise all the freed slaves. So they put a clause in the 14th Amendment basically defining citizenship at the national level.
Nationalized citizenship.
Yeah. Basically, if you're born in America, you're a citizen, because a lot of freed slaves would have a hard time complying potentially with state laws. So all they had to do is say, I was born here. That made sense then. In 1866, nobody envisioned 12 million people coming from the south of the country. There was no Texas. I guess, Texas was in the Union.
Yeah, they were.
I'm sorry. So being overrun by illegal immigration in 2012, the law needs to be revisited. The idea of changing birthright citizenship prospectively, and here's what the change would be. Congress shall have the authority to regulate birthright citizenship. Every country in the world, if you go to France and you take your wife to France and she has the child during a visit, the child's not a French citizen. That doesn't mean the French are mean. That means they're smart.
Yeah. Well, under the 14th Amendment, you talk about Congress having the power, the authority to determine who would get birthright citizenship. Part of that 14th Amendment says that not only is it the folks that are born natively in the United States, but it says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So in other words, not only native born on the soil, but subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. You have to question, and I think that opens the door for opportunity on this discussion, are these folks that came into the country illegal subject to our jurisdiction?
That has been litigated 3 times in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court every time has ruled that the act of being born in America under the 14th Amendment confers citizenship. It's the 3 Supreme Court cases that stand in the way of a statute. I would propose a statutory fix, but because of the Supreme Court's interpretation of the 14th Amendment, we're probably going to need a constitutional amendment. And it's a simple amendment. Congress shall have the authority to regulate birthright citizenship. You don't need to write a statute into the Constitution. Then we in Congress prospectively will set rules up about citizenship. And what we will say, if you cross into our country illegally and your child is born, that's not going to give that child citizenship, because if you keep that law in place, we're going to be overrun again.
So because of those 3 precedents, and I did read about those in a brief that Attorney General Gonzalez wrote on the 14th Amendment, you're saying we would have to have, and I agree with you, that it'd have to be a constitutional change, but you and I both know how difficult that is. What do you think the likelihood of getting an amendment to do this would be?
70% of the people believe that we should change birthright citizenship, and 70% of the people in the country are not mean or hateful. Logically, in the 21st century, does it really make sense to keep a practice in place that's being abused? It made sense in 1866 to protect people. In 2012, you're enticing people to break our laws, to come into our country in a disorderly fashion. All I'm asking is, if you want to be an American citizen, do it the way we say and make that a logical path. We can't have everybody come to the country. We have the right as a nation to protect our borders and control our economic destiny. I'm not asking much of the left, but I'll be accused of being a racist. And all I'm saying is I'm going to be fair with the 12 million, but if you want to continue a practice that's going to give us 12 million more, you're going to have to vote
Even
on
though
it.
you've been one of the people that supported comprehensive immigration reform from the beginning, you're probably right. You will get branded that. But
I just want you to vote. If you don't like what I'm saying, take the vote.
Well, I believe we need to have a comprehensive bill because I think you're right in this idea that the Hispanic community is inherently conservative. We need to go out and talk about in a humane way how to reform this system, but also how conservatism on the free market principles and social issues work for everybody, young people, older people, Latino, African American,
I'm going to make
everybody.
a prediction. You deal with immigration, you start talking about education, a way to empower minority families, we will dominate the 21st century as conservatives.